The sand felt like crushed glass against Kian's cheek. The night wind blew across the dark desert. Kian lay completely flat on his stomach. He tasted dry dirt in his mouth. His hands were numb from the cold air. But he did not move a single inch. He was staring at the big wooden house at the bottom of the hill. That house belonged to a rich man named John Miller. And tonight, something unimaginable was going to happen to John Miller. Before we continue the story, if you are new on my channel, please click on the subscribe button, like this post, comment where you are watching from, and share the story with your friends. Let's continue. Why was Kian risking his life tonight? Because time was running out. By sunrise, the town sheriff was bringing 20 men with rifles to protect this ranch. If Kian waited until morning, his chance for justice would be gone. If he failed tonight, his family's spirits would wander in the dark forever. He had to act right now. But the house below him was entirely silent. It was much too quiet. Where were all the guards? Kian reached up with a freezing hand. He touched his chest. Under his leather shirt, he felt a small wooden eagle. The wood was black and badly burned. It used to belong to his little brother. Now, it was the only thing Kian had left in the world. Every time he touched it, he smelled the terrible smoke of his burning camp. The memory made a hot fire burn inside his stomach. He wanted John Miller to feel that exact same fire. A dark shadow moved near the wooden fence. Kian froze in the dirt. A tall guard was walking with an oil lantern. The yellow light swung back and forth. The guard stopped right by the front gate. Kian's fatal flaw was his terrible impatience. A smart warrior would wait quietly for the guard to walk away. But Kian was too angry to wait. Hate made him rush blindly. He pulled a heavy rock from the dirt. He had to make a choice. Wait and risk the morning sun, or distract the guard right now and risk getting caught. Kian threw the rock hard. It sailed through the dark night air. It hit a wooden wagon far away with a loud crack. The guard jumped in surprise. He held up his lantern and ran toward the noise. He left the front gate wide open. Kian smiled a dark, angry smile. He had made a dangerous choice, and he got lucky. But luck in the desert never lasts very long. He jumped over the dirt wall. He landed softly inside the ranch yard. He was one step closer to his revenge. Suddenly, Kian heard heavy breathing. It was not a guard. Someone was hiding behind the large water barrels. Kian pulled out his hunting knife. The metal blade was sharp and cold. He crept toward the barrels. He was completely ready to fight. If he was caught right now, the whole ranch would wake up. They would hang him from the big oak tree by the barn. Kian stepped around the barrel. He grabbed the shadow by the shirt. He raised his heavy knife. It was just a boy. The boy's name was Toby. Toby was a young ranch worker. He was shaking in total fear. Toby dropped a small cloth sack on the ground. 3 green apples and a small glass bottle rolled out into the dirt. Toby was stealing medicine. Why was a young boy stealing from a wealthy rancher? Kian looked at the boy's terrified eyes. Toby looked just like Kian's little brother, the brother who died in the terrible fire. Kian felt a sharp, sudden pain in his own chest. Kian had to decide immediately: hurt the boy to stay perfectly quiet, or let him go and risk everything. Kian slowly lowered his knife. He pointed his finger out into the dark desert. He was telling Toby to run away. Toby grabbed his medicine and ran into the night without a single sound. Kian took a deep breath. He had let a thief go. Would Toby run and warn the guards? Kian did not know, but he could not think about that problem right now. He turned back to the big house. He had a dark job to do. Kian moved like a quiet ghost. He climbed the wooden steps of the front porch. The wood creaked a little bit under his heavy boots. He stopped and listened hard. No one yelled out. No guard dogs barked. He found a window that was slightly open. He pushed the glass up. He slid smoothly inside the house. The smell inside hit him instantly. It smelled strongly of lemon wax, sweet tobacco, and expensive leather. It smelled like rich people. It smelled like the man who destroyed his home. The anger in Kian's blood boiled hot again. He was standing in a long hallway. There were 3 heavy doors. Which one was Miller's bedroom? Kian looked down at the floor. The bright moon shone through the window. It lit up a pair of big, muddy boots sitting outside the last door. The rancher's boots. Kian walked very slowly toward that door. Every step was a countdown. 3 steps left. 2 steps. 1 step. He put his bare hand on the brass doorknob. The smooth metal felt like ice. If he opened this door, there was no going back. He would become a killer tonight. Kian turned the round knob. The door opened with a soft click. He stepped inside the dark bedroom. He saw a large bed in the corner. There was a big lump under the thick blankets. Kian held his breath. He gripped his knife very tight. He walked right to the edge of the bed. He reached out to pull back the blanket. He was ready to strike fast. But then, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze completely cold. It was the sharp click of a gun being loaded. The metallic sound came from right behind him. Kian spun around fast. He expected to see a giant rancher with a mean face. Instead, he saw someone sitting in a wooden chair in the dark corner. The moon moved from behind a thick cloud. The pale light fell heavily on the chair. It was a girl. She looked about 20 years old. She had long, dark hair. She was holding a large silver revolver. The heavy gun was pointed directly at Kian's heart. Her hands were not shaking at all. Her name was Sarah. She was John Miller's daughter, and she had been waiting for him. Kian stared deeply at the gun. If he moved fast, he could maybe knock it away. But she would definitely shoot first. The loud noise would wake the whole property. He was trapped. He had failed. His impatience had led him right into a trap. He should have waited outside. He should have watched the room first. Now, he was going to die right here. His family would never get their justice. Sarah stood up slowly. She kept the big gun aimed at his chest. "You make too much noise for an Apache warrior," she said. Her voice was quiet, but very strong. "I heard you drop over the fence 10 minutes ago." Kian felt his face get hot with deep shame. He was a great fighter, but his blind anger made him sloppy. He looked closely at her eyes. She did not look angry. She looked incredibly sad. Why was the rancher's daughter looking at him with pity? "Where is your father?" Kian asked. His voice sounded like dry gravel. "Where is the monster who burned my home?" Sarah took 1 step closer. The silver gun shined brightly in the moonlight. "You came for a monster," Sarah whispered softly. "But you only found a girl." Kian tightened his grip on his sharp knife. "Hate is a heavy blanket," Kian said, staring right into her dark eyes. "But it keeps me warm at night. Tell me where he is. I will not leave without him." "My father is not here," Sarah said. "He has been gone for 3 whole days. He went to the city to beg for money. We are completely broke. We are losing this ranch." Kian frowned hard. This made absolutely no sense. The raid on his camp was done by rich men with expensive horses and brand new rifles. If Miller was broke, how could he ever pay those men? Kian's mind spun with heavy confusion. Was she lying to protect her father? Or was Kian entirely wrong about everything? As Kian breathed in heavily, the burned wooden eagle slipped out from under his shirt. It hung on the leather string against his chest. Sarah looked down at it. Her eyes went very wide. She suddenly lowered her gun. You are from the river camp," she said. Her voice was shaking now. "You survived the terrible fire." Kian stepped forward. "Yes, I survived. Because of your father." Sarah shook her head back and forth fast. "No," she said softly. "Truth does not hide in the dark. Only liars do. My father did not burn your camp." Kian felt a strange panic growing in his chest. His whole life for the past month was built on hating John Miller. If Miller did not do it, then who did? "You are lying," Kian hissed angrily. He raised his knife again. "You want to save his life. You are a liar." Sarah threw her silver gun onto the soft bed. It landed with a quiet thud. Kian was shocked. Why did she disarm herself? She stood in front of him with empty hands. She was completely defenseless now. "I am not lying," Sarah said. She pointed out the glass window. "The men who burned your camp did it to steal our water rights. They blamed my father, so your people would kill him, and so the town would hate him." Kian followed her pointing finger. He looked out the window. Far away, down the dusty dirt road, he saw lights. Many lights. Some torches were burning brightly in the night. Men on horses were riding very fast toward the ranch. There were dozens of them. "Who are they?" Kian asked. His heart was hammering loudly against his ribs. The timer had run out much faster than he thought. He had planned for dawn, but deep trouble was here right now. Sarah grabbed Kian's arm. Her hand was surprisingly warm against his freezing skin. "That is Sheriff Vance and his deputies," Sarah whispered. Her eyes were wide with pure terror now. "They are not coming tomorrow to protect us. They are coming tonight to burn my house down, and they are going to kill us both." Kian looked from the approaching fire torches to the terrified girl. The men who actually killed his family were riding up the driveway right now. His revenge was not sitting in a soft bed. Why, his revenge was holding burning torches outside. He heard the deep, loud sound of angry horses outside the front gate. He heard angry men yelling. The front door of the house downstairs crashed open with a horrible boom. Heavy boots started running up the wooden stairs. They were coming for this exact room. Kian had exactly 5 seconds to decide. Run out the window and save himself, or stay and protect the daughter of his worst enemy. The heavy boots pounded on the wooden stairs. Each step sounded like a drum in the quiet house. Kian stood in the dark bedroom. He held his sharp knife in one hand. He reached for his wooden eagle with the other. The room smelled like Sarah's flowery perfume and the cold night air. But now, a new smell was coming under the door. It was the sharp, biting smell of kerosene. It was the smell of a fire starting. "They are going to burn us alive," Sarah whispered. Her voice was thin and shaking. She was looking at the bottom of the door. A thin line of orange light appeared there. The light grew brighter and hotter. The wood started to pop and crack. Kian's first thought was to fight. His blood felt hot like boiling water. He wanted to jump out and cut down every man in the hallway. This was his fatal flaw. He always wanted to run toward the danger. He did not like to hide. He did not like to wait. "I will kill them," Kian growled. He stepped toward the door. He was ready to throw his life away for a few seconds of revenge. "No!" Sarah grabbed his arm. Her fingers dug deep into his skin. "There are 20 of them, Kian. You will die before you hit the floor, and then they will kill me too. Is your revenge more important than my life?" Kian stopped. He looked at her eyes. They were bright with tears. Kian looked at his burned wooden eagle. If he died now, the truth would die with him. Nobody would ever know that Sheriff Vance was the real monster. Kian took a deep breath. He forced his legs to stay still. "The window," Kian said. "We go out the window." The window was high up. Outside, the wind was howling. Kian looked down. The ground was far away. Below them, men were shouting and laughing. They were throwing torches into the dry hay in the yard. The orange flames were jumping high into the black sky. The heat was already rising. Kian could feel it on his face. It felt like the sun was standing right next to him. Kian climbed out onto the narrow wooden ledge. He reached back for Sarah. "Trust me," he said. Sarah looked at the long drop. She looked at the fire inside her bedroom. She took his hand. Her hand was small and cold. Kian pulled her out onto the ledge. They pressed their backs against the cold stone wall of the house. "Look!" Sarah pointed down at the stables. In the flickering firelight, Kian saw a small figure. It was Toby. The young boy he had let go earlier was hiding behind a large water barrel. Toby was holding the medicine bottle tight. He looked terrified. But Toby was not running away. He was watching the sheriff's men. Toby saw Kian and Sarah on the roof. The boy's eyes went wide. One of the sheriff's men turned around. It was a man named Miller, but not Sarah's father. It was a deputy with a mean, scarred face. He was holding a torch. He started walking toward the water barrels. He was going to find Toby. Kian felt his heart squeeze. If the deputy found Toby, the boy would be killed. Kian had a choice. He could climb down the back of the house and escape with Sarah, or he could try to save the boy. "Wait here," Kian told Sarah. "Kian, no! Stay with me!" Sarah begged. But Kian was already moving. He was fast. He was like a mountain lion in the dark. He slid down a wooden post. He landed in the dirt with a soft thud. The air was thick with gray smoke. It tasted like ash. It made Kian's eyes sting and water. He crawled through the tall grass toward the water barrels. The deputy reached the barrel. He raised his torch high. "Who's hiding here?" the deputy yelled. He reached down to grab Toby by the hair. Kian didn't think. He acted. He stood up and threw his heavy hunting knife. The blade spun through the air. It hit the deputy's wooden torch, or knocking it out of his hand. The torch fell into a deep puddle of water. It went out with a loud hiss. "Run, Toby!" Kian shouted. Toby did not wait. He scrambled away into the darkness of the woods. But Kian had made a mistake. By saving Toby, he had shown the sheriff's men where he was. The deputy pulled out a heavy whistle and blew it. The sound was loud and sharp. "He's over here!" the deputy screamed. "The Apache is here! Kill him!" Kian turned to run back to Sarah, but 3 men were already blocking his way. They had long rifles. They were wearing shiny silver badges. These were the men who were supposed to keep the peace. Instead, they were laughing as the ranch burned. Kian felt a hand grab his collar from behind. He was yanked backward. He fell into the dirt. A heavy boot hit him in the ribs. Kian gasped for air. The world started to spin. He saw Sheriff Vance walking toward him. The sheriff was a big man with a white beard and cold blue eyes. He was wearing a fancy black hat. "Well, well," Sheriff Vance said. He looked down at Kian. "The savage came back to finish the job. You killed the rancher's daughter, didn't you?" "She is alive," Kian choked out. Sheriff Vance smiled. It was a cruel, toothy smile. "Not for long. Once the house falls, everyone will think you did this. I will be a hero for catching you. And I will finally own this land and all the water on it." The sheriff reached down. He saw the wooden eagle hanging from Kian's neck. He ripped it off the string. Kian felt the leather snap. "A toy?" The sheriff laughed. "You are risking your life for a piece of trash?" Kian watched as the sheriff threw the wooden eagle into the growing fire. Kian's heart broke. That eagle was his last link to his brother. He watched the flames lick the dark wood. But then, something strange happened. The fire did not burn the eagle right away. The heat caused the old black soot to peel off. Under the black ash, the wood was bright and white. Kian realized something. The eagle was not made of common pine wood. It was made of rare white oak. It was the same wood used to build the sheriff's own office in town. His brother hadn't found that wood in the forest. He had found it near the sheriff's men weeks before the raid. The eagle was proof. The sheriff had been planning this for a long time. "Look out!" a voice screamed from above. It was Sarah. She was standing on the porch roof. She was holding a heavy ceramic flower pot. She threw it with all her might. The pot hit the sheriff right on the shoulder. He barked in pain and dropped his gun. "Get him!" Sarah yelled to Kian. Kian didn't need to be told twice. He lunged forward. He ignored the pain in his ribs. He tackled the sheriff into the dirt. They rolled over and over. The sheriff was strong, but Kian was fighting for his life. Kian punched the sheriff hard, but the other deputies were closing in. They were raising their rifles. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the air. It wasn't a gun. It was the sound of the big oak tree by the barn. The fire had reached it. A giant, flaming branch broke off. It fell right between Kian and the deputies. It created a wall of fire. The horses in the stable began to scream in fear. "The horses!" Sarah cried out. She had climbed down the back of the house. She ran to Kian's side. "Kian, we have to let them out! They will burn!" Kian looked at the sheriff, who was crawling away. He looked at the deputies who were trying to get around the fire. Then he looked at the stable. The animals were trapped. This was the moment Kian changed. Normally, he would chase the sheriff to kill him. He would choose revenge. But Sarah was looking at him with hope. She didn't want him to be a killer. She wanted him to be a hero. "Go to the gate," Kian told Sarah. "Open it wide." Kian ran into the smoking stable. The heat was so strong it felt like it was melting his skin. He covered his mouth with his shirt. He kicked open the wooden stalls. One by one, the big horses charged out into the night. They were terrified, but they were free. The last horse was a giant black stallion. It was Sarah's favorite horse. It was cornered by the flames. Kian grabbed the horse's mane. He leaned close to its ear. "Run," Kian whispered. He led the horse through the smoke. As they burst out of the stable, Kian saw Sarah at the gate. But she wasn't alone. Toby had come back. The young boy was helping her pull the heavy wooden bar across the gate to lock the deputies inside the burning yard. "Kian, over here!" Sarah shouted. Kian jumped onto the black horse. He reached down and pulled Sarah up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Toby jumped onto a smaller pony. "Follow me," Toby yelled. "I know a path through the canyon where the sheriff's horses can't go." They kicked the horses into a gallop. They flew past the burning ranch. Behind them, Kian heard Sheriff Vance screaming in anger. The sheriff was trapped behind his own fire and his own locked gate. They rode hard for an hour. The wind cooled Kian's burned skin. Finally, they stopped by a small, hidden spring in the mountains. The water was clear and cold. Kian slid off the horse. His body ached. His ribs felt like they were on fire. He sat by the water and put his head in his hands. He had lost his eagle. He had lost his chance to kill the sheriff. He felt like a failure. Sarah walked over to him. She sat down on the grass. She reached into her pocket. "I saw it fall," she said quietly. She held out her hand. Inside was the wooden eagle. It was no longer black. It was beautiful, white oak. It shone in the moonlight. "You saved Toby," Sarah said. "And you saved the horses. You chose life over death, Kian. That makes you a better man than the sheriff will ever be." Kian took the eagle. It felt warm. He looked at Sarah. Her face was covered in soot. Her dress was torn, but her eyes were kind. For the first time in a year, Kian didn't feel the fire of hate in his stomach. He felt something else. He felt peace. "We are not safe yet," Kian said. "Vance will come for us when the sun rises. He has the law on his side. No one will believe an Apache and a girl." Sarah looked at the white eagle. "They will if we have proof. And I know where the sheriff keeps his secret papers." Suddenly, they heard the sound of a twig snapping in the dark woods behind them. Kian grabbed his knife. He stood up and blocked Sarah. A shadow stepped out from the trees. It was not a deputy. It was a man Kian recognized. It was the town doctor. He was holding a medical bag, and behind him stood Toby. "The boy told me what happened," the doctor said. He looked at Kian's wounds. "But you need to hide. The sheriff has sent a message to the next town. He has told everyone that you kidnapped Sarah. There is a $500 reward for your head, Kian, dead or alive. Kian looked at Sarah. If she stayed with him, she would be treated like a criminal. If he left her, she might be safe, but the sheriff would win. I'm not leaving him, Sarah said firmly. The doctor sighed. Then you must move fast. There is a train leaving from the valley at dawn. If you can get on it, you can reach the governor. But there is only one way to get to the station. How? Kian asked. The doctor looked at the dark mountain path. You have to go through the Devil's Pass, and the sheriff's men are already waiting there with a Gatling gun. The stars were beginning to fade. The sky was turning a soft, bruised purple. Dawn was coming. In the distance, a long, low whistle echoed through the canyon. It was the train. It sounded like a lonely giant calling out in the dark. That train was their only hope. If they didn't reach the valley station in 30 minutes, they would be trapped in these mountains forever. Kian felt the black horse breathing hard beneath him. The animal's sides were wet with sweat. It smelled like salt and warm fur. Sarah was still behind him. Her arms were wrapped tight around his waist. He could feel her heart beating against his back. It was fast, like a trapped bird. The Devil's Pass is just ahead, Toby whispered. The boy was riding a small pony next to them. The town doctor was on the other side. The doctor's face was pale. He looked at his pocket watch. The sheriff has the high ground, Kian. He has a Gatling gun. It is a machine that fires many bullets very fast. If we ride into that narrow path, he will shred us to pieces. Kian looked at the path. It was a narrow gap between two giant walls of red rock. It looked like a throat. It was the only way to the train station. If they went around the mountain, it would take 5 hours. They did not have 5 hours. They had 20 minutes. Kian's blood started to boil again. His fatal flaw, his hot impatience, told him to just ride. He wanted to scream a war cry and charge into the bullets. He wanted to feel the wind in his hair as he fought. I can ride faster than his gun can turn, Kian said. He gripped the horse's mane, so he was ready to make a terrible mistake. No, Kian! Sarah shouted over the wind. She slid off the horse and stood in front of him. Look at the rock walls. Look at the shadows. You are not thinking. You are only feeling. If you charge, you die. And if you die, who tells the truth about my father? Who stops Vance from burning more homes? Kian looked at her. Her face was covered in gray ash, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She was right. His anger was a tool, but it was also a trap. He looked at the white wooden eagle in his hand. The soot was gone. It was clean and bright. It stood for the truth. He had to be smarter than his enemy. Doctor, Kian said, his voice calm now. What is in your medical bag? The doctor opened his leather bag. Bandages, alcohol, some powders for pain. Why? Kian looked at Toby. Toby, you are small. You can climb the red rocks without being seen. Can you take the doctor's alcohol and a box of matches? Toby nodded. His eyes were wide, but he did not look scared anymore. He looked like a soldier. I can do it, Kian. I can climb the backside of the pass. They won't see me in the dark shadows. The wind is blowing toward the pass, Kian said. He felt the cold air hitting his neck. If you start a small fire with the alcohol and the dry brush, the smoke will fill the canyon. The sheriff will not be able to see where he is shooting. That is when we ride. It was a dangerous plan. If Toby was caught, he would be killed. If the smoke didn't work, they would all be killed. But they had no other choice. Kian handed the boy the doctor's supplies. Go fast, Toby. Like the wind. Toby disappeared into the dark rocks. Kian, Sarah, and the doctor waited in the silence. The minutes felt like hours. Kian's hands were shaking. He hated waiting. Waiting was the hardest thing a warrior ever had to do. He kept checking the sky. The purple was turning to gold. The sun was peeking over the edge of the world. Suddenly, a thick cloud of white smoke began to roll through the canyon. It looked like a ghost moving between the rocks. It smelled like burning cedar and sharp alcohol. "Now!" Kian yelled. He pulled Sarah up onto the horse. They kicked the horses into a gallop. They flew into the smoke. Kian couldn't see anything. The world was white and gray. He heard a sudden, terrifying sound. Click, 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 boom! The Gatling gun started to fire. The bullets hit the rock walls with loud cracks. Bits of stone flew through the air like stinging bees. Kian felt a hot piece of rock hit his cheek. He didn't stop. He leaned low over the horse's neck. "Keep your head down," he screamed to Sarah. They burst through the smoke. The sheriff was standing on a ledge above them. He was screaming at his men to turn the big gun. He looked down and saw Kian. The sheriff's face turned red with rage. He reached for his own pistol, but the horse was too fast. Kian and Sarah flew past the ledge. They were through the pass. The train station was right in front of them. The big black steam engine was huffing out thick clouds of coal smoke. It was starting to move. The wheels were turning slowly. Chuff, chuff, chuff. "Jump!" Kian yelled. He steered the horse right alongside the wooden platform. Sarah jumped first. She landed hard on the wood and rolled. Kian jumped next. So he hit the platform with a heavy thud. He felt a sharp pain in his shoulder, but he scrambled to his feet. They ran toward the last car of the train. Sarah grabbed the iron railing. Kian pushed her up onto the metal steps. He reached for the railing himself, but a voice stopped him. "Stop right there, savage!" Kian turned around. Sheriff Vance had ridden down the side of the mountain. He was standing on the platform. He was alone. His men were still back at the pass, lost in the smoke. The sheriff was breathing hard. His fancy black hat was gone. He looked like a wild animal. He pointed his pistol at Kian's head. "Give me the girl," the sheriff hissed, "and give me that wooden toy, or I will kill you right here in front of everyone." A few people on the train platform stopped and stared. They looked confused. They saw a dirty Apache warrior and a famous sheriff. They didn't know who to believe. Kian looked at the train. It was moving faster now. Sarah was reaching out her hand to him. "Kian, come on!" Kian looked at the sheriff. He could try to kill him. He could run and tackle him. But then he remembered the White Eagle. He remembered the truth. "You don't want the toy, Vance," Kian said loudly. He held the White Eagle high so everyone could see it. "You want the wood. This is white oak. It came from your own supply. The same supply you used to frame the Miller family. The same supply that was found at the burned camp." The people on the platform began to murmur. They looked at the eagle. They looked at the sheriff. "He's lying!" the sheriff screamed. His hand was shaking. "Nah, he's a murderer." "Then why is the Miller girl with him?" a voice called out. It was the town doctor. He and Toby had finally made it to the station. They were standing behind the sheriff. The doctor held up a stack of burned papers. "I found these in your office, Vance. The contracts for the water rights. You signed them before the ranch even burned." The sheriff froze. He looked around. The crowd was no longer scared of Kian. They were looking at the sheriff with anger. The lawman had been caught in his own lie. "It's over, Vance," Kian said. He didn't sound angry anymore. He just sounded tired. "Justice is like the sun. You can try to hide from it, but it always rises." The sheriff looked at the crowd. He looked at the doctor. He knew he could not kill everyone. He lowered his gun. His face looked old and gray. He had lost everything. Kian didn't wait to see the sheriff in handcuffs. He turned and ran. The train was picking up speed. He reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand. She pulled with all her strength. Kian swung his legs onto the metal steps. They stood together on the back of the moving train. They watched the station get smaller and smaller. They watched the mountains turn gold in the morning light. Toby and the doctor waved from the platform. The sheriff was surrounded by people who were finally asking the right questions. Kian sat down on the metal floor of the train. He felt like a heavy stone had been lifted off his chest. He looked at his hands. They were covered in dirt and blood, but they were not shaking. Sarah sat down next to him. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Where are we going?" she asked softly. Kian looked at the white eagle in his hand. He handed it to her. "We are going to the city. We are going to tell the governor everything. And then?" He paused. "Then we find a place where the air doesn't smell like smoke." Sarah took the eagle. She looked at the red mountains they were leaving behind. "My father's ranch is gone," she said. Her voice was sad. "My house is ash. I have nothing left." Kian looked at her. He didn't have a family anymore. He didn't have a home. He only had the clothes on his back and the girl by his side. Life was messy. It was broken. They were both covered in scars that would never fully go away. "You have the truth," Kian said. "And you have me. It is not a ranch, but it is a start." The train whistle blew one more time. It was a loud, strong sound. It was the sound of a new beginning. As the sun rose high over the desert, Kian finally closed his eyes and slept. He did not dream of fire. He dreamed of the wind.